We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Good evening, folks. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper.
Is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Time, weather, and
Veteran of 3 foreign wars, entrepreneur, and warrior poet, Tony Arterburn takes on the issues facing our country, civilization, and planet. This is the Arterburn radio transmission.
Transmitting worldwide from deep within the heart of Texas, this is the Arterburn radio transmission. I am your host, Tony Arterburn. It is the official broadcast of the apocalypse, the 5th of February, 2026. Less than a week after the largest drawback in gold and silver history. I survived it. Wise Wolf survived it. I don't know how. It was a bit stressful. But I probably just got a small taste of just how catastrophic that could be when you are dealing with millions or billions of dollars and a lot of market wiped out and then bounce back. And we'll talk about that today. I think it's just part of this territory that we're in, folks. We're going to dig into some what happened. We'll go over that article over on Natural News. And then we're going to talk about something that's being predicted by Martin Armstrong, who has the Socrates program. You've probably heard me bring him up many times. He also couples the price predictions with predictions of kinetic conflicts, and he's not often wrong, and I think the grand chessboard's being set up for that right now. So, yeah, last week we had the transmission. That was a week ago today, and everything seemed pretty normal. I jumped back into setting prices the next morning, and as I was watching just the red coming across this, every time I would refresh the page trying to find a price discovery of what I was going to pay for metals at my shops, and never seen it do something like that. But of course, we've never seen this territory of pricing either, and so eventually I had to shut down all buying. We stopped around 1 p.m. on Friday. I just don't know where this is going to land. But you have to do that sometimes. And anyway, it bounced back, or it's bouncing back, and it's all over the place. But we're going to get into that. If we can, we'll talk about some of the infighting, some of the predictions going on over on the Bitcoin side, which is a bit interesting. And I have a theory. I think all of this is creative destruction. Okay? All of it. It's everything. It's nothing as it seems, right? There's things that are completely overvalued in all this market. So much of it's fake. All the fundamentals are still there to create, massive opportunities and things that are finite, like gold, silver, and Bitcoin. But you never know, right? Because every day the market's going to tell you a different story. So you have to read between the lines. Let's hope we can do that together here on the transmission. All right, let me put this up on the screen. We'll go over a little bit of what happened. And again, parapolitics, precious metals. I've got an article I want to talk to you about everything that's happened from the Epstein drop. You guys probably know the highlights, but I want to go back to one of the fundamental things that I kept bringing up over the years when we talk about the flights to the Pedo Island and the Lolita Express and all the stuff that was going on. I said, yeah, that's interesting. But did you realize he was working on all this crazy stuff that no one ever talks about? And someone finally did, and it was a major outlet. And I'll talk a little bit about that here on the show today for sure. We'll see what all we can cover, okay? And what I've found through this program is that I never can get to all the articles, but I appreciate you sticking with me. And there's no commercial breaks. There's hardly any plugging at all. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's jump right in together. This is natural news. So we'll go over a little AAR, as the Army would call it, the after action review. I'll put your comments up on the screen too. I'll do my best to get over to Rumble, talk to the folks over there, and anybody who's commenting on X or YouTube. Appreciate you being here. All right, natural news, gold and silver markets in turmoil as Trump's Fed nominee triggers historic sell-off. David Knight and I talked a little bit about this. I knew he was going to have a play on words, but I was like, it's all going to come out in the wash, and he had a whole, he's like, this is not going to be whitewashed, and I thought he's already doing the puns. So I'm glad there's a reason. I think David has me fill in for him sometimes because I get his humor. A major sell-off in gold and silver was triggered by President Trump's nomination of Kevin Warsh as Federal Reserve Chair, causing gold to drop 8% and silver 7% on February 2nd. Does anybody, realize that was the 33rd day of the year? Following a historic 30% crash in silver on Friday, the sell-off was driven by three key factors: uncertainty over whether Warsh will pursue aggressive interest rates, a rebound in the U.S. dollar, which moves inversely to gold, and forced selling by leveraged investors facing margin calls. Some analysts speculate Trump may be intentionally engineering a dollar devaluation, potentially mirroring a Russian strategy of later stabilizing a currency with gold, which could make the current price drop a buying opportunity. Again, you got to read between the lines, folks. Market opinions on the future are divided, with institutions like J.P. Morgan raising bullish price targets due to geopolitical risk, while others warn the rally was a speculative bubble that may continue to deflate. The volatility spilled into broader markets, affecting Asian stocks and oil prices, and highlights how sensitive assets are to shifting central bank policy expectations, suggesting continued instability for precious metals. Well, just these highlights here. Again, you got to, I talked to David off air, and then I mentioned it while we were doing our interview today that, Tether, the stable coin, the dollar stable coin, it has a market cap now of $187 billion. Now, this is it's private, right? In quotations, it's a private stable coin, but they've amassed this massive market cap just tethering to the dollar. So buying treasuries, buying gold. They also have Bitcoin holdings. There's a lot happening right now. This isn't just, if you read markets, you think, oh, everything, if it's sound, it's fundamental, it'll always go up. It's always going to be up and to the right. And if it's not, then something's fundamentally wrong. No, that's not how any of this works. And we're not even dealing with normal market conditions anymore. This isn't even about supply and demand. We're way beyond that. As I mentioned to David today, the central banks bought on average 27 tons of gold a month in 2025. 27 tons a month. The sudden reversal has rattled markets, wiping out billions in speculative gains and raising questions about the future trajectory of precious metals and shifting monetary policy expectations. Gold has surged to an all-time high of nearly $5,600 per ounce last week, while silver briefly topped $120, fueled by geopolitical tensions, fears of inflation, and speculative buying, particularly from Chinese traders. However, the rally came to a screeching halt on Friday, January 31st, when Trump announced Warsh as his pick to replace Jerome Powell as Fed chair. Gold prices plunged 8% on Monday, February 2nd, falling to 44.65 per ounce, and silver dropped 7%, following a staggering 30% crash on Friday. The losses deepened early February 3rd before a partial rebound. The sell-off was triggered by a combination of factors: Fed policy, dollar rebound, and margin calls and leverage unwind. Many investors had borrowed heavily to capitalize on gold's rally. As prices fell, brokers raised margin requirements, forcing leverage traders to sell. Yeah, there's always this cascading series of events when you have leveraged assets, which everything's leveraged. You have to realize that's like the origin story of the Great Depression and the Great Wall Street crash of October 1929. The Fed had manipulated its way into controlling the money supply de facto at that time, right? We still had a gold standard. An ounce of gold was still $20, right? That we still had the $20 gold piece. We still had, the Americans could still own gold up until 1933. That was the whole basis of the economy. Well, what they did was they started using their ability to create liquidity. I'm talking about the Federal Reserve. And this filtered down into the larger banks, and they allowed people to get into this speculation of the stock market, and they would leverage, they would borrow to get in. You had this liquidity to borrow to get in, and then you had margin calls. So if the stock fell below a certain point, you owed, and the loans were called. And that's what it was, a cascading series of events that led to the crash. But again, all leverage though, and manipulation. Amid the volatility, some traders speculate that Trump may be engineering a deliberate devaluation of the dollar, mirroring Russia's strategy when Western sanctions crushed the ruble. Moscow stabilized its currency by backing it with gold, and some believe Trump could pursue a similar path. That's an interesting, you got to look at all this. Like, we're kind of following the thesis of Larry Lepard's The Big Print too, like where you have one big push, final push. It's kind of like a big jamboree jubilee. They just blow out the entire monetary system for a giant print. And I think there's something to that before they reset the price to something, because you can't go on like this forever. We're reaching $40 trillion in debt. And you got to remember, it took us from the founding of the country to 1980 to hit $1 trillion. And now we do it every 90 days or so, and just adding to the balance sheet. So all that is unsustainable. There has to be a tipping point or something. And so the creative destruction of whipsawing the prices and driving the dollar down and all that is a theory, I think, that holds some water. Said this, backing a national currency with gold is one of the most historically proven and economically sound strategies to ensure monetary stability, fiscal discipline, and protection against inflation and government abuse. Unlike fiat currencies, which derive value solely from government decree and are prone to manipulation, gold-backed money imposes natural limits on reckless monetary expansion. If Trump follows this playbook, gold could rebound sharply once the dollar stabilizes, making the current dip a potential buying opportunity. Well, I don't know that they're doing that right now in this time frame, but you have to understand that on a long enough time frame, you're going to have a reset of some kind. They've already signaled that that's going to happen. It may be by the end of the decade. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And we're going to get into a little bit of that with the Martin Armstrong article that I want to cover. The gold and silver crash underscores how quickly market sentiment can shift, especially when central bank policy is in flux. While some investors see the dip as a buying opportunity, others warn of further volatility ahead. Nevertheless, one thing is certain: with Trump's Fed shakeup, dollar dynamics, and geopolitical risk still in play, precious metals are far from settling into a stable trend. Well, that is a great summary of what happened. And yes, we're far from settling into any kind of stable trend at all. You can just look at the price of everything is being reset. This is, in conjunction with minerals, rare earth, copper, everything's being reset because the currencies are being debased, and those will continue to be debased. It's it's a thing about mathematics. It really doesn't care what you believe in. Math just is. It just shows up, and reality finally rears its head, and you have to abide by it. And that's what's going to happen we're very concerned and myopic, I think, because we have normalcy bias, and you just stare at something and say, well, this can keep going up, right? This, or if it goes down, well, that the experiment's broken. It's kind of like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going through a drawdown right now. And I think for a lot of different reasons, I think there's an accumulation phase still going on. I think this is psychological in so many ways, like just sending out signals, this doesn't work or that doesn't work, or there's a drawdown here. But you have to remember that in a sea of infinite, that is that which is finite, which is gold or silver or Bitcoin or something that cannot be replicated easily. And of course, Bitcoin, not at all. And so with a limited supply, you're going to win out in the end. But the path is not always certain. If you look at silver in 2011, it hit $50. So it almost broke its 1980 high in 2011. And there was a statement sent out by Ben Bernanke, and he said, look, this isn't going to happen again. The Fed's in control. We had to bail out these banks in 08, 09. This is not a policy we're going to repeat. We're going to reshore the balance sheet. We're going to get paid back for this stuff. So everybody calm down, because gold was hitting 1900, looking at breaking $2,000 an ounce. So that's 2011. So gold fell, silver fell, and there's a lot of gold dealers that had expanded. They went out of business. Especially just the regular walk-in shops, that we buy gold places. They went out of business because the margins, the higher the price of gold goes up, the more you get for scrap and things like that. So there was places that they folded, and there was some dealers that folded and brokers that folded. And that's always in the wake of these price drawdowns. And that lasted for a long time. I mean, you got to look. So I was live on air. It was I believe August 6th, 2020, when gold finally broke 2,000. So it took it from 2011 to 2020 to finally break that all-time high and getting past 1,900 and some change and hit 2,000. I was live hosting the David Knight Show. I was in Austin in studio. And I remember that. I thought, wow, that's a big milestone. So it took it, 9 years to hit another all-time high. We did like 50 this last year, all-time highs, ATH. And the same thing for silver. It took silver, it's 45 years to hit an all-time high. But once it broke it, it's, all bets are off. But we tend to forget those years when there's drawdowns. And we got to look at just after the post-election in 2024, right on the eve of the election, I was talking to David Knight about that. And I said, look at it. It's so much psychological. The fundamentals are still there. And we got a lot of noise in the way. If you look at if you take a sober look at where all the supposed wealth in the world is parked, it makes no sense whatsoever that you would be bearish, especially long-term, on anything related to physical precious metals or anything like that. If you know what I know, then this is just par for the course. I don't like the massive drives up in a short term or the draws down. The draws down really hurt because you don't really know where you're going to stand. It's hard to get, especially if you bought a lot of product. And I had to do what, my dad talked about this phrase when I was a kid. You had to kiss the pig, right? So I had to go kiss the pig, which just means you just bought something that you lost money on. And I told Yeka, I said, she does all of our invoices. She's like, well, if we sell it, we're going to lose money. And then I go, sell it. That's what we do. We got to get liquidated at a certain point. I can't just hold on to it waiting to see, if the price rebounds. So you just take your medicine and kiss the pig. And that's why I'm not worried, because then you see things like this article from Zero Hedge. I'll put this on the screen. If I can, I'll get into a little foreign policy today. This is Zero Hedge. I was telling David and I were discussing this morning. He quoted Zero Hedge about on a long enough timeline, the survival rate drops to zero. I said, yeah, that's a quote from Fight Club. And he said, oh, it is? I said, yeah, that's why it's by Tyler Durden, right? And I said, it's one of my favorite. That's a Gen X movie, for sure. I said, that's from the actuary tables of insurance. Gold's going to 10,000, says Martin Armstrong, warns Europe is desperate for war. This is in quotations. Legendary financial and geopolitical cycle analyst Martin Armstrong warned in late December to be ready for the perfect storm for debt, economy, war, gold, and silver. The rain and thunder started at the beginning of February, and the storm is just beginning, Armstrong says. This is where the volatility starts kicking in. Says, I think Europe is so desperate for war. My concern with the Trump administration is that I would not step foot in there. Europe needs war, he says. You already had the finance minister in Germany say that they need IMF bailouts. This is why they want war. It's a distraction. Without war, people are going to figure out what the hell is going on. Yeah, I love Martin Armstrong. Like this kind of, I've been reading him for years. He's got the Socrates program. He went to jail for it. This is like, I've talked to Charlie Robinson about this. This is it's interesting analysis. And he's right. I mean, war is the health of the state. And once you learn enough about it, you cannot cheerlead this stuff, especially wars of choice or us getting into some awful foreign war, a European war. That must be avoided at all costs. When asked where he sees volatility, Armstrong says, the volatility is in everything. You just saw the metals come down. They will probably consolidate before they go back up when people realize that Europe is going to go to war. Says what will happen? The dollar will go up. Metals will go up. It will be like World War I and II. The U.S. became the financial capital of the world because Europe blew its brains out twice. That's such a great description of what happened in World War I and II. It was the suicide of the West, the great civil war of the West, to quote Pat Buchanan, World Wars I and II. If there is war in Europe, it will be maybe in summer. It does not look good, says Armstrong. One bright spot was the Ukraine-Russia peace plan Armstrong put together at the request of President Trump. Armstrong says, I did get a letter from President Trump thanking me for writing it. So it was sanctioned by Trump, and that's pretty much everything he's doing except for NATO. Well, I hope somebody read it up there. This isn't the whole point is to stay out of Europe it's got a population crisis. It's got a debt crisis. It's got a currency crisis. It's got a morality crisis. This has been the rot has been going on for decades, and by design, and of course, it also has historical forces that it has to fight. The powers that be, the New World Order types, the Klaus Schwabian folks, they believe in one world government. They believe in centralized everything. They believe in you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. This is their philosophy, right? But people, human beings, aren't trending that way. Human beings are decentralizing. They're decoupling from these big supranational organizations and stuff. They want to decouple from that. It's all over the world. It's not just in Europe, but it's called ethno-nationalism. And that phenomenon is only growing, right? It's just like a natural succession and the advent of technology and other things has been a push to that. And so they're fighting against that as well. That's why they need war. It's kind of like in the United States at the end of the 19th century, we had 3 parties. And there was a major contender. There was a Populist Party, major contender for they had to actually took congressional seats. They were taking regional offices. It was a big blow to the duopoly of the two-party system. And so that was one of the reasons why they pushed for the Spanish-American War so hard, was to get everybody back in line politically. And it succeeded. But you have to understand, there's a huge populist movement, and it had to be captured by the establishment, just like they've done with nationalism in America First. It says, at the meeting, they told me, you are correct. We know we are not going to be at war with Russia. This is according to Armstrong. Let's hope the U.S. stays out of the coming Russia-Euro war. If we do, we can thank Martin Armstrong, who put his peace plan together for Trump for free. Armstrong also says the illegal alien invasion created by Democrats is the way they're going to stay in power. Don't be fooled by the close, dim wins in recent special elections, he says. Armstrong's Socrates computer has seen no advantage for either side for the midterms. Well, I would say the illegal alien invasion has been going on my entire life. And for some reason, I instinctively blame the Republican Party because they had the responsibility and the power, and they ran on stopping it and never did. And now it's gotten to the point where, well, you guys know. I mean, and I think a lot of this is being used to divide us and create the environment that is possible to create a civil war, if you will, something like that. But no, I do agree with, both parties. The Republicans want their cheap labor, Chamber of Commerce folks, their illegal alien maids, and the Dems want voters, right? That's been the evil agreement, the silent agreement between the two. And in Texas, in my state, you have jokes like Greg Abbott, who will bus people to Martha's Vineyard and stuff like that for these political stunts, which I don't think is funny at all. Says you can't park money in Canada, Mexico, Japan, or Europe. Says, where are you going to put your serious money? Says the United States is the only place. Sorry, that's why the United States is what it is. Big money needs a place to park. Well, that's true. A lot of the depositories and other things. In a world of chaos, this may be one of the best places. May not be the best place to live per se, but it might be the best places to park your wealth. It says on gold and silver, Armstrong is decidedly bullish on both metals. He said this is not the major high. We have too much craziness on the horizon, from sovereign debt default to war. We are just getting pullback and consolidation. Is I'm looking at $165 to $200 per ounce for silver. For gold, I am looking at resistance at the $8,500 per ounce level, and after that, $10,000 per ounce in the next few years. Well, on that, I agree. And it's not about price predictions. It's just fundamentals, folks. Like this, we're not having fiscal debates, okay? Nobody. We're not going to draw down the national debt, and Doge isn't going to come in and figure out where the waste, fraud, and abuse is or anything like that. We're just going to continue until you don't. And then, what is that for? The volatility and all the rest is laying the groundwork for a possible reset of the currency of some kind. So stay tuned. I'm sure I'll be on that, by the way. I will. People have written me, there's so many crazy, grifty things floating around the internet right now. And I have clients send me stuff and they'll say, is this real? Is the Treasury Department going to confiscate silver? Are we going to have $600 an ounce buyback program? Like, no, like this isn't going to happen that way. And a lot of that is just to drive up, get clicks and funnel people to buy something from somebody. So be careful out there. With AI especially, there's a lot of grifting going on, especially price predictions. I want to go to the comments really quick because I was paying attention to that. I see Jason Barker over in the chat. Bronx Stomper 111. I appreciate you being here. Martin Thorne says, hi, Tony. How about putting up a channel on Rumble? I do have a channel on Rumble. I broadcast on the America Unplugged channel over on Rumble. And we don't have anybody live in the chat right now, but I am live over on Rumble on the America Unplugged channel. So thanks for being there. If you want to comment over there, I'll follow the comments. All right, let's keep going. Oh yeah, Jason Barker says you're running live on Rumble. I saw you live there. I appreciate that. It's I think next week I might run the show on Wednesday. I might see if David we can do the talk on Wednesday, and I might do the show a day early because I'm going to be traveling Thursday. So we'll see if I'll put out an announcement. So watch for that if you're tuning in. All right, let's continue. See how much show can I put into an hour? How many articles? Let's see. Let's put up. Should we do a little bit more economics, and then I'll just put this up really quick because I think it's a big part of the future. We'll talk about Bitcoin for a second, and then I want to jump over to the article on Epstein. Just a little bit of the parapolitical, so we don't lose focus on what all that meant. This is from CoinDesk. He says, here's what the industry veterans are saying as Bitcoin tumbles below 70,000. And then, quote, the drawdown feels horrible, but not because of the magnitude, but because it's unfair, said Bitcoin maxi Samson Mao. Bitcoin plunged through the 70,000 and now through 68,000. Here's what some longtime watchers are saying. For newcomers, the recent sharp decline may come as a shock, but Bitcoin has seen numerous such panics in its short life. That's what I was saying earlier. Like this, it has survived so many of these drawdowns, and you got to remember, like, if you take a step back, you realize like this is being accumulated, and there's a reason. Like they're using it, and the articles that have come out, especially since the Epstein drop, that he had been funding these MIT departments or donating to some of the people that put the first or some of the first operators after the Bitcoin white paper and after Bitcoin had been launched and all the rest. And I don't have that doesn't sully Bitcoin to me, from what I can understand. I think that a lot of this is misinformation, or it could be another, like, to keep drawing down the price, because there are folks that have run much more sophisticated. This is gut level stuff to me, like what I read through history, what I've done in my own life, what I've seen in the last 10 years. I can't believe it's been 10 years since I got into Bitcoin. So what I've seen, it leads me to understand, like, this has been, remember we hit 67,000 in 2021. And when I went to the Nashville conference in July of 2024, Bitcoin was at 68,000. So there's volatility in all of this, and I think people were just very excited then too. And I realized that it has more momentum, more adoption. That's still there. So all of this is, I think, a prep for something else. Just my opinion, and I'm not trying to sell you on Bitcoin. I mean, it's not even, I don't move that much Bitcoin. I just use it. But I think it's interesting to see these situations line up. And almost, there's so much in the red. There's so much that's been gutted. For newcomers to Bitcoin, BTC at 66,834, the recent price plunge may feel like a shock. Many believe they were getting in early last October when BTC hit an all-time high of 126,000, encouraged by a big talk from the Trump administration, Wall Street's acceptance and forecast of imminent 1 million per coin. But what began as profit-taking snowballed into forced liquidations. They anticipated passages of the Clarity Act, and it stalled, leaving regulatory uncertainty. Tumbling below 70,000 earlier Thursday, Bitcoin has nosedived 45% in less than 4 months, maybe prompting some to completely lose faith in the long-term value. Well, that's probably on purpose. And Samson Mao, he says it feels unfair. He says everything goes up, but we're sideways. AI bubble fears, we go down. Metal crashes, we go down too. He says, however, absolute scarcity is real and it will hit a limit. We can't be pushed down forever. That's a great way to close it out because the fundamentals are just very true. And I think this will be shown. You can replay this a year from now. Something will happen. There'll be a catalyst event for doing something, whether it's a pairing with a stable coin, whether it's governmental, it doesn't have to be the West, it could be something else. There will be some sort of catalyst that puts it back, and I think probably by design. But long term, does it even matter? We're pricing things in fiat dollars that literally aren't real. We're pricing things in psychological perceived value, which is an insane thing in and of itself, And I think the real challenge is unlearning that. It's a real challenge for me. I still price things in dollars. I still look at something and think, oh, that cost $1 or that's $5, but it's not, it's 40 or whatever it is, like you just see so much of the stuff that's in your mind, like because you grew up in the 80s and 90s or whatever, and you just look at something and go, oh, I see, that should be X, and it's not. It's because the dollar continues to do that. It just declines. You got to think about this, folks. A $20 gold piece in 1933, before Franklin Roosevelt signed his executive order, had $5,000 of purchasing power today. Minimum. So think about that. A $20 gold, $20 had $5,000. So there's nothing wrong with the gold. There's something wrong with the currency, but we keep pricing things in it, even after it's not backed by anything. It's funny. If you look at some of the old notes too, they'll make you laugh, or at least maybe I have a dark sense of humor. I looked at a $20 bill from like the 1930s or 40s, and it says on there, it's not a Federal Reserve note, by the way, but it says this note is redeemable for lawful money. It didn't say that it was. It says it was redeemable, and it was a note redeemable for lawful money. And the joke is that $20 whatever bill was redeemable for lawful money through the gold window, but only if you're a foreigner, only if you weren't a U.S. citizen. If you were a U.S. citizen, it was illegal for you to hold gold. So interesting. All right, let's go into some of the parapolitical. I'll see if I can cover some geopolitics here. There's an article on Taiwan. I'm doing my best. We'll see if we can get to it. All right, let's jump over into this. So I saw this headline. It was over on Drudge, and the headline. So I scroll down and see the headline and put this up on the screen. Yeah, Jeffrey's sinister plot to seed the human race with his DNA. This is a link on Drudge, by the way. So let's put this up on the screen. This is what I've been talking about. I wonder, when they did the Warren Commission, and it was just this giant data dump mixed with nonsense and things that weren't real, and then interviewing people that weren't necessary to be interviewed, and just like lacing it's like burying the truth with an avalanche of nonsense. And it kind of reminds me all this stuff with the Epstein drops. And I don't know if it reminds you of that. I'd love to see what I'm praying for Donald Jeffries and his family. He lost his sister and his niece and her daughter, like within days of each other. It really, really is sad. He wrote an article about it, and I'd love to talk to him about this stuff, but I'm wanting him to be okay. So prayers to him and his family. But I know that he would look at this in very similar way of the data dumps and things that went on with the Kennedy assassination and how you are able to bury something in plain sight. Epstein's sinister plot to seed the human race with his DNA. The late sex offender had secret eugenics obsession. His plan? Genetically engineered children using his own sperm. And this is coming from the Telegraph, the UK Telegraph. Since Jeffrey Epstein's death in 2019, wave after wave of evidence has put him at the center of a wide-ranging network of sex, money, and influence involving many of the world's richest and most powerful men. But the 3 million documents released by the U.S. Department of Justice last week show that, as well as his criminal and sexual proclivities, the convicted sex offender was also obsessed with genetics and improving, quote, in quotations, the human race. The new files reveal racist and sexist conversation, as well as a fascination with transhumanism, a branch of philosophy that incorporates eugenics ideas and artificial intelligence. Well, that's where you get, and he, by the way, he's funding, the people in the PayPal mafia, this like the MIT and all this stuff that you can say it's associated with Bitcoin, but these are people that gravitated towards it. But he's funding all this stuff, or he's as a donor to this, and they believe in something called the singularity, is where man merges with machine in a moment of convergence, right? The new files. Let me see. I want to make sure. The new files reveal racist and sexist conversations, as well as a fascination with transhumanism, right? Among the most galling exchanges are those connected to race. Epstein, who was first convicted in 2008, speaks freely of his belief that black people are genetically predisposed to be less intellectually developed than whites. In one 2016 email to Noam Chomsky, the linguist and activist, Epstein states, the test score gap amongst Africans and Americans is well documented, and that making things better might require accepting some uncomfortable facts. Well, that's really sad. I used to read, I would read Howard Zinn, and I would look into things, and there'd always be like this cross pollination between that generation, like Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky. And Chomsky has the most bizarre, like, just fall from any sort of credibility to me, especially with the jab and everything that went in 2020, 2021. If you go back and, like he said, if you don't get it, you should be, people should be put into camps and everything. Like, it's just, you go back and look at, or they shouldn't, they shouldn't be allowed food. And it's just, I mean, this is just totally discrediting all of his anti-war and pro-human stuff that he'd done for supposedly for decades, and then he's just having casual email conversations with Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, another exchange gives a better sense of what those uncomfortable facts might be. An email conversation with German cognitive scientist Jaka Bach, an influential figure in AI who was working at MIT at the time, where he had received $300,000 donation from Epstein, implies Epstein was interested in the possibility of genetically modifying black people to make them, quote, smarter. In one message written to Epstein in July 2016, Bach wrote, if I understand correctly, you're suggesting you might be able to make blacks smarter by changing the time for motor layer development. This is the stuff, I'm telling you, like, this is the stuff that they were doing. Like, this is the intelligence op and all. I mean, it's so ridiculous. You see, like, Drudge is like, oh, it's the KGB. It's everybody. Like, it's Mossad. This guy's a conduit for so many different things. It's like a front man. This is a pre-internet intel op. And, I've even read reports where people would go up to Epstein and people that knew, like hedge fund guys, and they try to talk to him about, trades and stuff. And they was like, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know what I know. Like, he's dumb. And then you see the interviews with Bannon. I don't know. I have such a mixed feeling on all. I know that there needs to be disclosure, and we keep getting these dumps, and like who was associated with, you know, the girls and all the stuff that he's trafficking, but there's just more to it. And I'm wondering, it's like, do they continue to go back to that to overshadow all of this stuff, the transhumanism, the Zorro Ranch stuff? And that Zorro Ranch, the thing he had in New Mexico, was surrounded by public land on all sides. Yeah. How do you even do that? And their conversation appears to be based on pseudo neuroscientific belief that there are layers to cognitive development. In the exchange, Bach argues that black children's motor skills develop faster than white children's, apparently at the cost of more advanced development. He asserts that this is because Africans are adapted for a more running, hunting lifestyle. Again, these are the conversations that these people are at. You know, they rebrand, like these eugenicists and stuff. They always rebrand themselves. And they can just get into environmentalism, whatever it is, and they hide behind that. So and this is what you find in the green movement, right? The green movement is watermelon. It's green on the outside, communist red on the inside. It's all about depopulation, all about control. And at heart, they're racists and eugenicists. Let me just skip around here because of time. Hold on a second. I want to get past that. They can hit on this for a while. Some eventually turned their back on him, but others remained in touch for years. Epstein's proclivities became clear, just as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Peter Meltson did. In 2006, Epstein organized a conference at St. Thomas in the British Virgin Islands where speakers included Stephen Hawking. Although the conference was about the theory of gravity, one attendee reported that Epstein appeared interested in perfecting the human genome and how inherited traits could lead to superior human beings. It was not only his foray in the field, he donated $6.5 million to Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics and held lunch there. In 2011, he donated $20,000 to the Worldwide Transhumanist Association, now called Humanity Plus. Oh, I love the rebranding. Indeed, the latest tranche of files paint a picture of a man who was obsessed with the idea of genetic superiority, a Jew who cracked jokes about the Holocaust and was fixated on Aryan characteristics. In emails, Epstein repeatedly stresses the desirability of blue eyes, which he was convinced were a sign of intelligence. He sought blue eyes in women he procured for sex, but he also in other company. One document lists the attendees at a science convention alongside their eye color. His interest was not merely theoretical. As investor, too, Epstein was fascinated by the possibility of designer babies and genetically engineered children. In one document released by the DOJ, Epstein recounted a conversation with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor about cloning one of several times. Cloning comes up in the Epstein files. The way they structured that sentence, about cloning, one of several times cloning comes up in the Epstein files. Okay, that has a dash in it. He says, I want to start cloning things. Me, he says. And with certain people, Prince Andrew got upset because he was all, if I had a conscience, could you kill it for spare parts? And I said, this is Epstein. I said, I'll make it without a head. Would that make you feel better? Well, I don't know why it surprises people. We get the royals involved, you get the House of Windsor, and the House of Windsor comes out, and they had the royal bloodlines. They were very incestuous. Like they just, the same families. And of course the Windsors, came out from Germany originally, and they were installed in, the king of the British throne. But they had ties back to Romania and to Vlad the Impaler. So their family actually goes back to Dracula. And Prince Charles went over to Romania and did a tourist He did a tourist infomercial for him, or a PSA saying that it was in his blood. Very true. So yeah, they do have a conscience. They try to make their clones without a head. Epstein replies, "I have no issue with investing. The only problem is I have to be seen as lead." This is when they were looking into funding designer babies. This is a decade after his first charge of soliciting prostitution from a minor. The following July, he was charged with sex trafficking of minors. A month after that, he died by suicide. Right. It's funny how much this story, this one person, has had so much of an impact. I mean, you talk about and where there's this much smoke, it's the fire, right? But it may not be what I'm always trying to figure out. There's always political implications, and you get the Bill Gates trying to, score antibiotics to slip to Melinda, all this stuff. Like that's the tabloid stuff, and I'm sure there's truth to any of that stuff. But the real things, though, if we're really stepping back and there's something going on with this thing. I want to keep going here and see how much I can get into. The revelations of the past week follow previous reports that Epstein was planning to use a 7,000-acre ranch in New Mexico as a facility where he would, quote, seed children with his own DNA. In 2019, just weeks before Epstein died, the New York Times reported that he had confided in a number of scientists and others about his plan. According to the report, during the early 2000s, Epstein repeatedly spoke of his desire to use the Zorro Ranch as his base in which women would be impregnated with his sperm and give birth to babies. The property was reportedly one of the places where Epstein abused young women and minors. Jaron Lanier, an influential computer scientist and one of the New York Times key sources, said that Epstein had modeled his plans on the repository for germinal choice, a sperm bank in California founded in 1980. The founders had hoped the bank would be stocked with Nobel laureates to improve the human gene pool, but only one Nobel laureate contributed to the facility before it closed in 1999. In his own scheme, Epstein reportedly planned to have 20 women at a time impregnated. He was said to have used opulent dinner parties to screen possible candidates, namely attractive women with impressive literary credentials. Other sources quoted by the New York Times said Epstein also discussed an interest in cryonics, an unproven field of science which is focused on freezing dead people's bodies with a view of bringing them back to life in the future. He reportedly spoke of a desire to have his own head and male genitalia frozen. I wonder well, maybe he's just like Whitman, Price, and Haddad, like the Running Man. He's somewhere on an island. At least in the projection. Who knows? I've seen lots of those videos that are trying to like compare his nose and his ear and stuff. But, what are the mathematical chances? You think about this. Jeffrey Epstein was given his first job to work with young people by Bill Barr's dad. And he was, like working as a teacher. By the father of Bill Barr, who was the attorney general at the time when Epstein was arrested again and then didn't kill himself, right, in prison. Think about that. And then, it's funny, like, do you know what the technical term for the average cold, like a rhinovirus, and so basically coronavirus, is Epstein-Barr? Life is kind of funny. There's too many synchronicities in the simulation gets lazy sometimes, I think. I just looked at the comments, saw Jason Barker's. He says, I'm going to claim that I'm one of those kids and ask for my inheritance. Well, that was something I covered, the Zorro Ranch and then the Zorro Trust, and it won the lottery, which, that's this is like a money, that should be a national scandal, but I don't think anybody noticed, you can look it up. It was Oklahoma. That's impossible. So it's used as some kind, don't get me started on the state lotteries. Despite the lurid details, there is no evidence Epstein's breeding at the ranch Zorro ever got beyond the dinner party conversation stage. But apart from the shocking suggestions of costly corruption and abuse among the global elite, the latest files confirm the impression of a deeply strange man whose criminal sexual activities went hand in glove with other sinister fascinations: race, gender, and genetic superiority. It closes with, Epstein might have been obsessed with improving the human race, but he was one of the most gruesome examples. And we may never know the truth of what any of this meant, but I think this is where you go to uncover the true intentions and things like what was that about? It's a fascination with the elite. They want to talk about eugenics. They want to talk about eye color. This is something they just harp on, and it's been that way for centuries. And it's like the Malthusian model, and then filtering in like the late 19th century was full of this stuff, and it's only gotten worse. And then you get the transhumanism model, right? Transhumanism model is about the singularity and the AI God and all the stuff that will. This is the vision of the folks in Davos. Like, this is like their pivot to be as God, right? Or their attempt, right? It's always a bastardized version. All right, let's see. Let's see if I can do it in 2 minutes. I'll try it real quick. See if I can leave you with this. Just something on the foreign policy front. And maybe I'll just go just a tiny bit longer. I hate to rob my folks over at WWCR. I'll bring you some bonus material next week, perhaps. Might go over just a minute, but this is on antiwar.com. Just an important piece of news. Xi tells Trump Taiwan is the most important issue in the U.S.-Chinese relations. The Chinese president said the U.S. must handle Taiwan arms sales with prudence, according to Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping told Trump in a phone call on Wednesday that Taiwan is the most important issue in U.S.-China relations. President Xi emphasized that the Taiwan question is the most important issue. Again, he did it twice. The conversation came a little more than a month after China launched a major military drills around Taiwan, simulating a blockade in response to the Trump administration approving a series of arms sales to Taipei. According to the Chinese readout, President Trump said he understands how China feels about the Taiwan question. In his statement on the call, Trump said they discussed Taiwan and several other issues. I just thought this was an interesting headline coming back up at this time with everything going on in the world. Watch that. There's something to that. And you have to remember, we long ago, 1972, gave a verbal promise to Mao Zedong that we agreed with the one China policy. Jimmy Carter put it in writing through Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1979, just basically ceding it over in a one China policy and cut off diplomatic relations with Taipei. That's why it was weird when Trump's first call out, as when he was elected the first time, was he received a call from the Taiwan president, and it got eaten alive by the press. You're not supposed to do that. We've done some sort of pivot here. So I'm watching this closely because I think it's interesting that we've already had this conversation, but now we're pivoting again. And it may be just to have those tensions, just have that ready, on the books that we can back something or appear to back something. So watch that very closely. A lot of these things will be settled, perhaps in the next 5 or 10 years. So something to watch. And I definitely will keep my eye on it for you. So appreciate all of you for being here. I'm going to close out the transmission. I've got Beans the Brave here I've got Beth, the German Shepherd, Pumpkin, my cat. I could see her. She's hanging out on the counter with Houston, and we're helping customers here at Denison location. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll be on America Unplugged on Saturday hopefully with the legendary Donald Jeffries and Billy Ray Valentine of the Gorilla Underground podcast. So appreciate everybody for being here today. You guys take care of each other. End of transmission.